So, Laurent, you just came out of a retreat. Tell us about
Yeah.
it.
So it was a Goenka Vipassana retreat. And so I saw that you recommend to do some retreat, but mostly like by yourself in nature. And that really appealed to me. But I wanted to try out also these Goenka retreats to see what was inside exactly and have my own experience. So um, it was very hard for me. It was very unwholesome. I came in very confident. So I had practiced. I was very wholesome, and I could keep it up for like a few days. But most of the time, just the pain and also the fact that I felt like not free to do what I want. And that was very hard to like to keep the hindrances off my mind.
Hmm.
But so very tough, like very hard, and I mean very unpleasant. But also I got the chance to see how I created all this misery. So I know like what was my want, and like if I wanted to get out of the room, I would suffer more. So
Hmm.
I learned how to see like this dependent origination that we were talking about, like
Okay.
how the mind affects the feelings, the sensations in the body, and how I could sometimes ask myself, can I be satisfied with this maybe this anxiety or this bodily sensation, and then it would turn into a good feeling instead. So that was interesting. I think I learned by observing also on myself. So
They go
good
ahead.
and bad. I mean,
They
it was
they
yeah.
they do these retreats with the idea of helping the student by taking away all of the things that are unnecessary, so that the student can just focus on what they need to focus on for practice. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to work, because the students are already dependent upon all of the things that they would normally bring to a retreat with them. And so having those things removed so that there's really nothing to do and no place to go. And the
Mhm.
students are generally not ready to handle that yet.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, and so the idea then, if you go off on a private retreat, then you can, let us say, uh, mollify the disasters because of the kind of things that you do bring to it. For instance, if you go on a 10-day camping trip, you're going to bring all kinds of camping equipment that you can play with that you're not going to get to play with if you do a retreat.
Yeah, and you can go on walks and watch nature. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember the
And
best time was when I would get out of the hole and just watch some insects.
mhm.
Yeah.
so so a good retreat would be a balance. Whatever the student is ready for, that we can balance the getting away from it all and dragging a little of it all with us,
Mhm.
so that we can find a middle path. That the retreats are set up in that way for the very, very best of the students, ones who have done many retreats before. But in a lot of other cases, the retreats are for the beginners. And so the structure is for the advanced students, and let us say the situation is designed around the advanced students. But most of the students are new, and so they wind up doing it that way. And so it's kind of out of balance. It would be good if we could find a way of having students in a retreat who are all basically on the same level, so that we could set things up like that for them, but that's never the case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
And so they say things like, well, don't bring any books, or we'll take your books, we'll take your cell phone, we'll take your computer, we'll take your television, we'll take everything that you used to use as time structuring, so that you can find a new way of time structuring. But most students don't. They go into misery because they don't know how to structure their time
Yeah.
one moment at a time. And so I thought that I would mention that as part of the problem with the retreats is that it's impossible to get one retreat size that fits all. It's not
Yeah.
very easy to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like any teaching. You have to make it individual for the
Hmm.
student.
And also, because you had gotten a lot of instructions on how to practice correctly before you went to the retreat, you had that to fall back on, to where many of the students didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Many students will go into retreat right, not really understanding what's going on, and they're kind of lost right from the very beginning.
Yeah. Yeah, that was, I think, an advantage, but also I forgot how it felt to feel really bad. So that was also like a shock when I started getting a negative emotion and not being able to flip them. And
Right.
also I saw that it wasn't working the way I felt was helpful for me. So but I still wanted to see what was in the end and the body scanning and stuff. So that was also
Mhm.
part of the suffering. But yeah.
One of the things that happens quite often is with students when they go into their own old kind of negativity, they wind up doing that, but then blaming the retreat people for it. In other
Yeah.
words, I feel bad now because of
Because,
the retreat. And I want out of this retreat so I won't feel so bad.
mhm.
So
Yeah.
they miss the point. The better way of looking at it is, hey, these people have done me a favor by putting me in a position that I have to deal with what's happening in my own mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if we see it that way, then we can recognize then that it's not their fault
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
I don't have my book. It's my fault that I don't like it, that I don't have my book,
Exactly. Yeah.
my cell phone, or whatever it is. Um, and so um, let's do this. Tell me what you advantage or what value you got out of doing the retreat.
Well, I really noticed more that the emotion, the sensation that I was feeling are on the body. Usually, I saw them like being, in front of me or on the side, and now I feel like when I scan the body, I can feel them more right here. I don't know if
Hmm.
the location is important, but now I feel them more like sticking to my body. Uh, Kind of a feeling like this. I can go through them more easily, so I can see them and I react. That's very, helpful. I think because I can less of them are like unnoticed and ignored, so I can not react as much and be able to switch before I go into like a bad mood.
Hmm.
um, Also, I saw how my want was creating the suffering. I knew it, but I saw it even more. I found new wholesome talks to have to try to fight the negativity. um, and I saw how I could feel unsatisfied even in a very beautiful environment with everything I needed. So
Hmm.
I just thought about all these things, and I think like yeah, being happy is the only thing that make sense working for. I guess. Uh, yeah. And how much I distracted myself also every day from the negativity by doing things. And yeah.
Well, one point of good fortune that you can look at, or that you can say that you were lucky, that at least you had some experience of and knew, at least intellectually, how to practice correctly. To where many people who go to a retreat, they hear about it, they think it's a good idea, and they go to it unprepared.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
go
So everyone was
and
miserable, and that was very deeply sad for me. I mean, and some people are doing it. They told me afterward for like 15 years, and I asked them if they had as much negativity, and they were like, "Yeah."
Mhm.
And even the teacher, everyone has had a very like sad face, and that was very. I understand how important what we're doing
Well,
is.
at least everybody should be at the end
Yeah,
of the retreat really glad that it's over.
yeah, that was the case.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, we could have had that gladness that it's over starting on day one, but we don't do it. That we don't know how to practice correctly, and even if we know intellectually how to practice correctly, under the circumstances, it's hard to continue to apply that because the old negativity is so huge. It just keeps coming back and coming back and coming back and coming back. But if you're at least practicing a little bit correctly, over a few days, you begin to go through that. That most of the misery is at the beginning of the retreat. And if you're practicing correctly, you kind of fall into the routine of it, and then it becomes kind of really okay. Did you experience that? Did you ever get into the position to where you felt like, well, this is all right. This retreat's not bad. I can
Well,
handle this.
a few days. I had maybe 3 days where I felt good. Most of the day, and I could even smile myself, and
Mhm.
that was a. I felt like a success during these days, and but I mean I'm kind of proud of it. It's good enough.
Mhm.
I think it's normal that I couldn't feel good throughout the whole retreat, so just
Okay.
a good experience. Interesting.
Think think about it kind of like this. Here's an analogy for retreats. Retreats are very much like the student is a young bird who has not yet learned to fly, and that the adult birds say that it's time, and they kick him out of the nest.
Yeah.
Well, what happens with every young bird when it's kicked out of the nest is that it starts to fall.
Mhm.
The question is he ever during that fall going to figure out that he's got wings and he can make a choice, or is he going to crash land?
Yeah.
And most of the students in retreats wind up crash landing.
Also, the thing I did that helped me was not to stick to what they told me as instruction, because when I was trying to apply what was said, I would really go like down. So
Hmm.
sometimes I had intended to leave the awesome thoughts and what we practice. I mean, the way we practiced aside to really experience what was there, but I couldn't do it all the way. Sometimes I had to just stop the scanning and do awesome thoughts to to survive
Uh-huh.
emotionally.
Well, one way of
Yeah.
looking at one way of looking at this whole process that is actually common. We see this in things like AA. When people go to AA to quit drinking, the ones who are successful are the ones who have hit rock bottom.
Mhm.
People who are, let us say, forced into therapy or forced into AA by the court,
Yeah.
they generally don't get anything out of it.
Mhm.
Okay, because you haven't hit rock bottom yet, or you haven't seen dukkha yet. Okay. And so this is part of the reason for setting that course up the way that it is, kicking the birds out of the nest, because here the ground comes right up at you. You got to do something about it, or you're going to crash land. You're going to hit rock bottom.
Mhm.
And so that's, but I don't think that that's actually the best way to teach, because the students in that regard have to see the dukkha themselves without actually knowing what to look for. This is why a very good understanding of the nature of dukkha, really get the Four Noble Truths down before the retreat starts, so that you can begin to practice correctly right from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And you can see that in some ways you were doing that a little bit, but not completely.
Mhm.
That if you had been practicing correctly according to seeing the dukkha every time that it came up, then you'd begin to learn to maneuver around it rather than crashing into it. But the retreats are set up that way, and that's I have actually seen the statistics or been informed about it, uh, that it takes a long time for the second retreat. That students will take a first retreat, and whether they admit or not that they got anything or not out of the retreat, it's still going to be a long time before they do another retreat.
Mhm.
That
Yeah.
proves that they really didn't get out of it. That in fact, if the retreat was successful, then the attitude would be, I ain't going home. I'm going to stay here.
Yeah, yeah. That wasn't the case for most people. Yeah, yeah.
But everybody at the end of the retreat, almost everyone says, let me out of here.
Yeah.
I want away from it. So that means then that they really don't hit rock bottom, but they come pretty close. Because if we do hit rock bottom, then that is actually a huge wake up call. That happens in various things, and possibly drug addiction and uh, AA or Narcotics Anonymous and that kind of stuff really works very well when people do hit rock bottom, because they recognize, hey, I've got to do something. This is not working. I've got to do something new.
Mhm.
But mostly when people go into retreats, they go into it ignorantly, and they're not aware that the whole situation has been taking all the supports out of you, so that if you're not practicing correctly, you are going to hit rock bottom.
Mhm.
No cell phones, no communications, no writing utensils, no entertainment, nothing except deal with your own mind. And if people are not able to do that, then they're going to hit rock bottom. And if they are able to do that and keep flapping at least a little while, a little bit, they're going to start coming out of that funk
Mhm.
into a really nice space during the retreat. So that's what I was kind of asking you about. Did you ever come to the point where you really liked being in the retreat?
I at some point I did, and I also felt like I did hit rock bottom. I felt one day I was just at the end, like I thought I was going to go crazy or something, and I was thinking about all kind of like dark stuff, and I even thought about death, and I realized like everyone, like myself and everyone I know is for sure going to die, and I just realized it, you know, deeply. And then I thought about it for the whole day. I couldn't keep it out, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to keep it out because I knew it was true. So I tried to, you know, see it and work with the emotions around it. And after this day, I was like just exhausted. But it was on the ninth day, so the 10th day we just talked, and yeah, at some point it felt good, but maybe I didn't hit rock bottom hard enough. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Well, um, the the right way of teaching the teachings of the Buddha is to get the student to become aware of that they don't have to hit rock bottom, that you can see that you're falling through the air. It's time to start flapping. It's time to pull the ripcord and open the parachute or something like that. That while you're in that free fall, it's time to do something new. This
Mhm.
is where we start practicing correctly. Is oh, I can in fact start doing something new right now. I don't have to wait until I crash land and then do something. I can start doing something right away. And so
Yeah.
this would be the value of the retreats, getting off into seclusion. There's a whole lot to be said about it. One of the points is that actual seclusion, where the Buddha says to go to the forest or to the foot of a tree or to an empty hut and sit down and bring mindfulness to the fore. That's basic. That's in several suttas. I have never ever seen any sutta say sign up for a retreat
Yeah.
and go to a
Yeah.
retreat. And then, in fact, the retreats themselves are uh, not a retreat because someone is not in seclusion. They're at best pretending to be in seclusion. And if there's 100 students in that retreat, then that's 100 students jam packed together, each one of them pretending to be in seclusion.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
there's a whole lot of negative thoughts and stuff in the air that, in fact, one of the favorite reasons for people going into bad feelings is by blaming the other students. Oh, he's coughing. I can't concentrate when he's coughing. All right. Instead of what you can enjoy coughing. There it is, your choice. Are you going to complain about that coughing or are you going to just be there with it? And so we often blame the other students. This is part of the reason why I'm saying that the seclusion is actually artificial. It's not real. That the real point would be to actually take the retreat time to go off into the woods, take your camping equipment and go and be alone, really alone.
Yeah, that's why you realize that the negativity is coming from you, and
And then you have to
and yeah,
recognize it all because the forest is not making you feel bad.
yeah,
You're doing that. And so this is the real point is that when we do recognize that we're the ones that responsible for making the best out of that retreat, then we can do that. But we almost always come into it with the idea of the normal person, and we wind up blaming the retreat, blaming our lack of entertainment, blaming the other students, instead of recognizing that that blaming needs to be changed. That's
yeah,
what needs to be changed is the blaming. So when you catch yourself blaming the retreat or the furniture or the room or the people or any of that other stuff, that should be a trigger, and they should mention that in these retreats.
yeah, yeah. That's true. It would be helpful, at least at the beginning,
Hmm.
to talk about this. Yeah.
Well, I don't know who did the retreat nor who set it up, but I do know
I think you froze.
videos from time to time. It doesn't matter. So
Mhm.
anyway, I'm pleased that you're telling me about the retreat that you were going to. What I had started to talk about was, and I saw it really strongly in the Goenka, that the students who run the Goenka retreats are so in a box that none of them will actually learn how to manage and run retreats because they keep using old videos, old CDs and DVDs from Goenka, and then the new teachers don't get trained. And the worst part of it is that any of the things that could be made different don't get made better because they're too busy trying to keep it exactly the way that it was in 1980. in India in 1980.
Yeah, it's
And I
different context.
and I also see that a bit in the Mahasi method, that they try to do it the way that it used to be done instead of doing it according to what the students in this class need today.
Mhm.
And so that's another problem with the retreats is that even though students will have a new issue that the teacher didn't talk about 40 years ago, but we know they're having that trouble. We don't talk about it today, even though we know it's a problem because it wasn't talked about 40 years ago in
Yeah.
the retreats that happened back then, back in 1980. Let's see, 80, yeah, it has been about 40 years.
Yeah.
So, uh, if we were going to do retreats with good teachers who know what the students are going through, we could set the retreats up better for that. And this is actually part of the reason that I had stopped doing the retreats. The last retreat that I ran was about 2005, and I haven't run any retreats since then. So it's been more than 15, 17 years since I've led them. Now I tell the students, go to the woods, go into private for your time. You don't need to do the retreats because the instructions you don't need that you get in the retreats, because the instructions are there for those who don't know the instructions. You already know the instructions. You already know what to do.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And,
And yeah, the woods sounds a lot more interesting,
Mhm.
like
And then you can
peaceful
deal
and
with the real things. Okay. An example of that would be that in the retreat setting, things don't go bump in the night. And if they do, the students still, even though they may not like the environment, they feel fairly safe and secure. When
ah,
you go off into the woods and are sleeping in a tent, there is going to be noise in the night, because that's one of the things that students do call about is that things go bump in the night and it's a bear. What do I do about the bear attacking me? Guess what? Just because something went bump in the night didn't mean that you were attacked.
mhm. Yeah,
That okay, and so students can actually deal with more real issues like fear of bump in the night and that kind of thing. Um, Going on walks would include going on walks to be able to walk a log.
mhm.
Okay, because now you're practicing balance. You're being in the here now, learning to balance and do many of the things in the woods we will do. We will actually learn to be kids again. We'll go do the things that we would do if we were 10 years old. Here we are 35, but we're going to go out in the woods and spend a week in the woods all alone. What do? We do the things we would do when we were 10, and we can
That
learn
sounds
to
really good.
enjoy it. But
Yeah,
when we get into those heavy duty retreat settings that have a very, very heavy schedule, you got to
yeah,
be there. You got to sit. You got to do what you're told to do over and over again. And that's actually going to build resentments just like it
yeah,
would in a 10-year-old kid. The 10-year-old kid is out there in the woods having fun, doing what he wants to do. You put a 10-year-old kid in a retreat, he's going to be miserable.
yeah. That was me. Like the feeling of having to do stuff. So I would repeat to myself, I chose. I'm free. I can go whenever I want. I don't have to even go to the meditation hall right now.
Mhm.
But I would impose myself to do it. And this rule, I think I probably have some trouble with rules and authority.
Mhm.
And I also wanted to ask you about this. How could I maybe not be disturbed by the rules? Because I mean, for now it served me because I started working for myself and because I couldn't handle being not being my own boss or having people telling me what I should do and stuff. But
Mhm.
sometimes it's hard because I want to set rules or like follow some rules and and the feeling of not having freedom, and
Mhm.
that's
Well,
tough.
one of the things that I would do, or that I do, when the student comes to tell me, oh, they're going to do a retreat, I very rarely talk them out of it directly, because there is value in doing those retreats, even if the value that we get out of it is, well, I'm not ever going to do that again, because now we know. If we had never done a retreat, then the answer would be, well, gosh, I maybe stop playing in the woods and go do a real retreat.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so if the students want to do a
Yes.
retreat, I'll say, sure, go ahead and we'll talk about it afterwards. But you do realize that, um, never mind the settings and all the rules and all the procedures and everything that we've already talked about from it, it does give you a complete opportunity to sit there with nothing to do and no place to go and enjoy the heck out of the retreat. And nobody does that.
Yeah.
Nobody does that,
Yeah.
when in fact, many of them will go to the retreat with that idea in mind. Oh, yeah, I can just sit here and do
Hmm.
nothing and just enjoy myself for the next 10 days. And
Yeah.
nobody does that. They don't do it. Why? Because all the old hindrances of the mind come right back up, and we have to learn to
Mhm.
deal with those things. And so you could say that the first retreat that someone does, it really is all about hindrances, that we can't do anything when the hindrances are there. And the whole first retreat should be seeing those hindrances, removing it, see them come back, removing them, see them come back again, throw them back out, over and
Yeah.
over and over and over again. And after 4 or 5 days of that, we can come into a really nice state, even if we haven't been practicing much of throwing hindrances out. If we recognize that's the only real job to be done, and with all of the instructions and whatnot that the students get, rarely do they get this point about the hindrances have to be removed. This is your
Mhm.
first job, is to come out of the hindrances so that you can actually now begin to get some real value out of the retreat. But so long as you're in a state of not liking the retreat, not liking the settings, not liking the rules, not liking doing without all the stuff that you used to play with and all of that, then we get stuck into that not liking, and that becomes our retreat for us,
Mhm.
of not liking. And so I'm glad to hear you tell me that you finally stopped doing that after a while and started
Mhm.
actually practicing correctly.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Good
had
for
no
you.
choice to like. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah.
And so now you can make better choices about how you're going to deal with retreats, whether you're going to go do yet another retreat, or whether you're going to actually go off and do it the way that the Buddha said, and just get yourself away from it all, just get yourself into seclusion and start having happy, marvelous, wonderful thoughts over and over and over again, because there's nobody there to push your buttons.
Yeah.
But in a retreat, you've got hundreds of people pushing hundreds of buttons for hundreds of people. And yet at the same time, they're presenting to be in seclusion. Well, real seclusion doesn't have any rules. Real seclusion doesn't have a bell. Real seclusion doesn't even have the meditation hall. And so
Yeah.
all of these formalities that are trying to give people the feeling of seclusion doesn't really cut it, because it's not real, it's artificial. That's the problem with retreats, that they're artificial. And that, in a way, they're not only artificial, but many of the retreats in the West, not like in Asia. In Asia, the retreats are, there's a piece of floor over there, that's where you can sleep at night. But in the West, they wind up being a fancy hotel suite with a nice bed and all that kind of stuff. I don't know what kind of retreat that you had, but at Wat Suan Mok, all the students get is a slab of concrete to sleep on.
Yeah. That's tough. No,
And
we
so,
had beds. Not crazy good, but regular like mattress.
Okay.
But
Well,
the environment was beautiful. The food was good. I mean, everything was nice. Like when you look at it, and that I really realized that it was myself that was not enjoying this paradise.
r- right. So the retreat centers try to make it as best that they can and as much like Western the world as they can while they're adding the retreat to it. Which actually that makes it expensive. What makes these retreats in the West expensive is the accommodations that we don't need.
Yeah,
But many of the students, they don't know how to sleep on the floor. They don't know that they could bring their own bedding and make a pallet or several blankets, and they don't know how to sleep on their sides and all kinds of other stuff to get ready for doing one of those really wilderness retreats is really what would be much better rather than these organized hotel rooms, having the meditation hall converted out of a hotel ballroom. That seems to be the way that many of the retreats are set up, trying to make it as easy on the students as possible because of giving them good accommodations. But then, why do they make them sit on the floor?
yeah, yeah,
Well, that's because they do the sitting on the floor in Asia. Well, in Asia, they sleep on the floor too. Why do we have to have beds on one hand and no furniture on the other? So that's kind of weird. But if you do a retreat in Asia, you don't get any furniture, you don't get any bed, you don't get nothing.
mhm, yeah,
But they often give people more freedom, the freedom to go on walks in nature and whatnot like that. Um, and so the important thing that I have seen is that many of the students, when they go to a retreat, they don't get proper preparation. They're not ready for the retreat. During the retreat, there's so many students and so few teachers that they don't get really good guidance personally, but they get Dhamma talks, one, two, or three a day.
mhm,
And then at the end of the retreat's over and everybody's got to go home. And normally they pay for the retreat. And then when the retreat, it's like a business deal. You pay for the retreat, you do the retreat, you don't get ready for the retreat, and there's no after uh, follow up after the
yeah,
retreat is over. To where if you have a relationship like we have, you after your retreat, you can come back and we can rehash this stuff and figure out what worked and what didn't and all of that kind of stuff. And most people who do a retreat, they don't have that.
yeah.
The
That's
retreat's over
very
when
valuable.
it's over. You go home now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's true. Yeah, that's very
Uh,
good to have. Actually, I'm really grateful for for what we have here, yeah. And all the work we do because I feel like how much value, how much joy it has brought me. So yeah, I really when I was in the retreat, I was like, wow, I didn't realize how good I was.
I've had
So,
conversations with Achan Po about that, that one's own liberation is marvelous. But guess what? The teacher, when he sees the student making great progress, he gets great pleasure out of that also. In fact, most of the pleasure that I get now is not from my own development, been there, done that, but watching the students gaining their own progress, gaining their own value. That's really the sweet part of being a teacher is seeing the students getting success. And that's part of the reason why I don't do retreats much anymore, is because during the retreats, the students are not getting much success. They're too busy following the rules
mhm.
and trying to
Yeah,
put up with the new environment and all of that kind of stuff. And nothing is really okay in a retreat. But that's why it would be much better for each student to get good instructions and then go off and do the retreat on their own, knowing that if they need the teacher and to fill in some gaps, they could call him on the cell phone. You can take a cell phone into the woods, but you can't take a cell phone into the retreat. They won't let you. They'll take your cell phones away from you, so I've heard. I've even seen it done.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
And
Mm.
in some places they'll even take passports.
Yeah, that's another kind of retreat.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Um,
And how
and
would you
but
recommend to, like, if I go off in the woods, maybe I wouldn't do it for like 10 days, but maybe start with four in the
a
mountain or
weekend,
the wood.
a,
A
a
weekend.
weekend,
I mean,
yeah.
I can 4 days would be good because I work only like 2 3 days a week now because I'm
Hmm.
getting lazier and lazier, and then, and so then I have a lot of time that I want to put to good use, and this sounds very like a good use, and also something I would like to do, even if it wasn't for a retreat. So,
Hmm.
um, what would you recommend to, like, if I go off in the woods for 4 days, should I just try to feed the wholesome thoughts and remove the hindrances and do that in like in secluded environments, or is there some like talks I should listen? How would you structure that? And the time I have during the retreat.
Well,
The seclusion.
I would I would make sure that the either in the orientation, or and that's the best place to do it, and then maybe do it again on the first morning of the retreat after it gets started. Normally they have the orientation on the evening before the retreat starts, and then it starts early the next morning. But in that orientation retreat is the time to give proper instructions for what should be done right from the very beginning, rather than waiting for the middle of day one to tell the students, oh, now that you've been practicing 2 or 3 hours
Yeah.
without any instructions at all, I'll give you some instructions now. That's not the right way to do it. It's better for the students to have some instructions before they start. And then those same instructions are repeated over and over and over again for the first several days, to make sure that the students know that the best thing to do is to remove those unwholesome thoughts. If you think that this retreat center is bad, that you make it bad. You make your environment destructive because of the destructive thoughts that you have. And so we have to come out of those and come back to the point of, well, really, there's no place to go and nothing to do. I can just sit here and I don't even have to wait for the bell to ring because I don't even care. Okay. But a lot of students are sitting there waiting for the bell to ring, waiting for the bell
Yeah.
to ring, waiting for, I don't, and that possibly is because in these retreats they set too long.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that we did change at Wat Suan Mok, so that the sitting time now is not an hour or 45 minutes, it's down to 30 minutes or even 20 minutes, to have the students sit for a shorter period of time, because that second half of the hour is when real misery sets in. We
Exactly.
can
Yeah,
handle
I
it for a
noticed.
few minutes or maybe 10 or 15 or 20 minutes, but when 30 minutes sets in and 40 minutes, it work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're
Work.
not
Yeah.
there to get the students to be all miserable and everything. We're helping them to come out of the misery that they brought in with them. And
Mhm.
so, shorter sitting times, more walking, more in nature, each student actually going out on walks to get into seclusion, to be away from everybody else. And in that regard, I don't think there's any retreat centers that are actually big enough,
Yeah. Yeah.
that they need to leave the retreat center property in order to get away from people at the retreat center. And you can't do that. They've got a rule saying, oh, stay on our property.
Yeah. There's like the yeah, the barrier. I don't know how what's
Whatever
the
the
right word.
boundaries are,
Yeah.
right? Stay
The
within the
boundaries. Yeah.
boundaries.
Yeah.
And so that's the problem, is that we're setting up an artificial situation to
Mhm.
try to mimic a real situation, and it's got lack of benefits. That, see, when you're off on the woods together, or alone in seclusion, then the bells don't mean anything. The hourly bells don't mean anything to you. You don't have to follow those kind of conventions and rules or whatnot, because when the bell rings, then what are you going to do? Well, you could have
Yeah.
done that before the bell rang.
Yeah, yeah. I can just be like self-reliant. Yeah.
So, if the students are going to practice correctly in there, then they need to be given the instructions correctly. We need to have shorter periods of time for the sitting, and to not do such formalities, especially in a lot of the retreats have a lot of Asian formality to them that seem strange to the students, that are not really all that necessary. Um, and so this is part of the reason why I've gotten away from the retreats into the issue of each individual going and doing their own retreat, and doing it wisely, doing it with being well prepared before you go, and doing it correctly, and then getting the great benefit out of it, including dealing with things that go bump in the night, and recognize that, okay, bears don't make noise at night.
Yeah.
So if you hear something go bump in the night, you can say, wow, I'm glad it's not a bear. Because bears don't make a bunch of noise unless they're tearing into something. But when they're out on the prowl, they don't make a bunch of noise. That it could be a tree that falls or all kinds of stuff that could happen. But the point is that at night, this is a time to be alert, be awake, watch what's going on. If there is a noise, check it out. But if there's a noise and there's fear, then check out the fear and then check out the noise.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so
Yeah, you have
there's,
to very in the moment to like get what's happening and where is the boar or where is the the animal.
mhm.
Like the,
Yeah. So the whole real point is to be here now with what's going on, and to recognize that, yes, so I felt afraid because I heard something make a noise. That doesn't mean anything. And pretty soon you begin to get fearless. Oh, I can handle being out in the woods alone. I've done it one or two nights in a row. I can do it a third time. And it begins to build confidence. And so these are the things that I would say, if the retreats are building the things that are talked about and mentioned in the suttas, especially the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Noble Path, then that retreat is good. But if the retreat winds up making problems for the students rather than solving the problems that they came in here with, then that retreat is not of the best value that it could be. And as far as I know, that's how all the retreats are run. They're run according to a tradition, the way that they used to run them. They're running them with a little comfort. And it's also, the more people in that retreat, the better, because they can make more money with more people in the retreat. To where the right kind of retreat is when there's only one student.
yeah, seclusion.
And so then that student can actually be in seclusion.
I see. Yeah.
Hmm. So anyway, Lauren, I'm really glad that you called me to tell me that you actually did make some progress finally in the retreat. You finally came out of the hindrances and started enjoying the fact that there's no place to go and nothing to do.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it was a good experience. I wanted to share it also with you, and maybe that could be helpful for some people that want to go into a retreat.
Hmm.
Be
But
prepared.
some people just stay miserable in those retreats for the whole time, and then they feel like a failure.
Mm. Yeah.
But you don't look like you feel like you're being a failure. You look like you got something valuable out of that retreat, that you're actually able to get over the hurdle that they created for you.
Yeah, yeah. Even if it's unpleasant, it's always interesting. So it's always, yeah. Doesn't mean because I felt bad that it was bad. I mean, Just yeah, yeah. All right. Thank you
Well,
for the talk.
yeah. So
For
we can
listening.
call this a bit of debriefing, and you can get back into your practice and give me a call, and we'll talk about more of correct practice. But I would like to finish this with congratulating you. You survived.
I did.
You didn't come back and start grumbling to me about how bad the retreat was.
Mhm.
Because it wasn't
Yeah.
the retreat that was bad, it's the mental attitude about the retreat that's bad, and you were able to overcome that. So, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, well, we'll see you later.
Good to see you. Have a good moment. Bye bye.
Okay, bye bye.